Welcome to Collecting Consciousness, where we aim to capture the ever-expanding and evolving conscious creations that originate from the minds of fellow podcasters, strangers, dear friends, and loved ones.
In this podcast, we will expand on our inner wisdom and a coming home to self. From our conscious minds to yours, we welcome you to the Collecting Consciousness.
So welcome back to another episode of Collecting Consciousness. And we are here today with a very, very special guest, Kari Kindem. And Kari is a classically trained homeopathic practitioner with an emphasis in guided detox cycles, megapotencies, AO scan technology, and HTMA testing. She works with women, men, and children to detox them from vaccines, birth control, antibiotics, heavy metal exposures, environmental toxins, and so much more. With over 20 years of experience in homeopathy, she has a wealth of knowledge regarding the human body and the myriad of ways that homeopathy can assist in restoring our health and vitality. And we are very honored to have this time with you today to explore the topics of infertility, the impacts of birth control, why detoxing with homeopathy is essential, what is homeopathy, what a homeopathic detox looks like within Kari's fertility program, womb wisdom, and I know so much more will unfold as we chit-chat today. So I'm going to open it up to Kari to take it away with her wisdom.
Thank you for having me, Bethany. It's a privilege to talk to women about their spiritual power of fertility. Mm-hmm. And I want to start by saying that my website, Homeopathy for Women, my focus in my practice has always been with women because they come with men and children. Mm-hmm. So I'm one of 8 children, and we have a saying that says, when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people have come to my practice for themselves. And then I've treated their husbands and their children with homeopathy, which is an energy medicine. And I want to, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what I might do with someone to help them and why we would need to do that, I want to just explain that homeopathic medicine is frequency-based. And it's a different way of thinking. It's not a chemical. It's not a drug. It's not a physical substance. It's an energetic frequency. And we use homeopathic remedies from plants, minerals, animal secretions, and also toxic products that are highly potentized. So there's not a single molecule left in the tincture that's dropped on those cute little pills. A lot of you have probably been to Whole Foods or Sprouts or a store, and you've seen the homeopathic remedies. Look in this little tube. They're inexpensive. And the knowledge to use them and the consulting knowledge is really what you're paying for. A lot of people can do self-care for acute needs, migraines, bruising, bumps, fevers, things like that. And that can easily be taught for the simple things and basics. And one of the things I'm the most proud about in my practice is the number of women who have been in my practice who then went on to become homeopaths. Mm-hmm. So impressed with what happened in their lives and the changes that they saw. And homeopathy is an empowering medicine. You take control, you stay away from big pharma, and you use natural products to stimulate your body to do what it would do anyway, way faster. So when I'm explaining homeopathy to someone, I say, we have a God-given energy and a God-given purpose in all of the complex cycles in our body, from a detox cycle to methylation to the endocrine system. It's incredibly complicated. Modern medicine tries to take apart one little section of that and fix that. But we're a whole human being. We're a spirit, mind, body. And that connection, that holistic connection, is what homeopathy works with. Every remedy that we have has a mental, emotional picture, as well as very specific physical symptoms that it addresses. So being a homeopath, unfortunately for the homeopath, is a lifetime of study, because there are about 5,000 remedies, and they're adding new ones and materia medica for new ones all the time. So part of the journey is to broaden your knowledge as a homeopath, and your clients are your best teachers. You keep learning and you keep learning. But when I do a homeopathic detox cycle, I am looking at a specific problem that someone has, And I'm addressing that specific problem with a combination of remedies in a dosing cycle that takes about 10 weeks. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm kind of depressed, I can't get pregnant. I've tried to get pregnant. I kind of don't know what's going on. The first thing I'm going to do is take a detailed medical history. The very first question I'm going to ask is, were you on birth control? How long were you on birth control? And they'll say, oh, I was on birth control 5 years, but that was 5 years ago. That is a red flag for me. Anytime a woman says I've been on birth control, red flags pop up. And so we know that using birth control alters the God-given rhythm of our bodies. I tell all young women, including family members, that when you are born female, your first and most important job that God has given you is to be a fertile female. That's the role, among many others that you will have in your life. But that is the primary function, that God has blessed you with, the ability to bear children. And what I like to add, the ability to bear super babies. Mm-hmm. Because we're interested in having someone get pregnant. A lot of women who struggle with infertility, pregnancy is the goal. Pregnancy is the goal. I say, no. Super baby is the goal. No one wants to go through 9 months of pregnancy and then have a high maintenance, fussy, clingy baby that they can't put down, who's exhausting them, possibly with developmental issues, which can happen from birth control. So what I try to teach women in my practice is what we correct in ourselves, what we heal in ourselves, we pass on that corrected energy to our children. Mm-hmm. And that's so important because there's a wonderful book I had talked to Bethany about prior called The Secret Life of the Unborn Child. And there's a whole host of things that go on in the relationship between mother and child, starting at conception. And the intention to conceive is actually part of that child's energy field. Mm-hmm. So the child is going to get the energy from the father and the energy from the mother. In that implantation and those frequencies and those genes and those, what I call the gestational soup, is where mom is brewing that baby. Her hormones, her minerals, her neurotransmitters are affecting every second of that baby's gestational life. But once that baby is formed, that baby takes on their own spiritual identity, but they are heavily influenced. And the dads don't get off the hook. Oh, no. The relationship of the father to the mother is profound, and the support that she would feel from the husband, including the extended family. Mm-hmm. So once you have that pregnancy, there are so many influences on the mother. And the first influence is going to be her spiritual desire to have the baby. I've told a lot of people that when I take a case history, I say, were you wanted? Were you planned? Mm-hmm. And for people who say, no, I wasn't. My mom tried to have an abortion, but she changed her mind. No, I was a whoops baby. My mom and dad were struggling. My dad was having an affair. She had 4 abortions before me because he was unfaithful, but decided to keep me. Things like this totally influence the baby. So I want to back up a little because I'm kind of going downstream to the pregnancy. But when we're looking at birth control raises estrogen. That's its purpose. And basically birth control chemically is a whole bunch of mini abortions. If you were fertile and an egg was implanted, the birth control would degrade the egg. So you have tiny mini frequency abortions, chemical abortions from birth control. That's something people don't think about, but that's what's going on. That's why you're not getting pregnant. So as we raise estrogen, we raise copper. And copper toxicity is a massive epidemic in America right now. And I want to talk about that because no one talks about it. I know what it looks like because I do hair testing. And I can look at a hair test. I do hair testing through HTMAexperts.com. And with 1 tablespoon of hair, I can map the entire mineral portrait of a person, and I can tell whether they're copper toxic or not. I can tell them which minerals are out of range. I can tell them whether they're hypothyroid. I can tell if they're on their way to diabetes. I can tell the health of their adrenals, and I can tell that in a snapshot. I've done thousands of them. I can just look at it, and I've got the information that I need beyond what they might tell me. So I use a hair test to confirm mineral dysregulation. One of the most important mineral dysregulations is that of copper. Now, copper is a good mineral. I call it the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It's a good mineral. You have to have it. In fact, when you get pregnant, your copper level is going to go up 400 times during the pregnancy to build the vascular tissue of the baby. And at the very end of the pregnancy, you're going to be doing a major cramping called labor, using that copper up and birthing your baby. So it's a perfect system. What happens if a woman has a C-section and she doesn't have that cramping and that labor and delivery naturally? She will very likely have postpartum depression because her copper level will stay too high, and it will affect her neurotransmitters and her serotonin. And there's actually 4 types of depression, biotypes, and postpartum depression. We've heard those terrible stories about an exhausted mom who killed her family because she was so depressed. Well, that's a copper toxic exhausted mom who was not guided mineral-wise during her pregnancy. And those are sad stories. But I'll be the first to say I had a C-section on my first pregnancy. I had postpartum depression. I didn't know about homeopathy. I didn't know what it was. They wanted to give me antidepressants. I put them in my hand, got home and flushed them down the toilet because I wasn't going to do that. But I thought, wow, that was a 5-minute visit where she handed me antidepressants. It wasn't, there was no conversation. Gosh, did you have a natural labor or delivery? Should we do a hair test and see how high your copper is? What could we do with minerals to balance those? What could we do with added support? You look exhausted. You're depressed. Of course you are chemically unbalanced. Now, I look back in my life, and if I had had a homeopath with the kind of knowledge that I have, I wouldn't be here. So everything that I've learned, I've gone through the school of hard knocks, and every mistake that could be made in one's personal life, I think, and family life, including with vaccinations and other choices, I've made those choices. But the beauty of homeopathy is we are absolved of our mistakes because we get to fix them. We get to fix everything by the grace of God. So there's a lot of forgiveness in homeopathy. There's, I tell people, as long as you have a heart that's beating and a desire to make changes, we can do that. And in my practice, I specialize with people under the age of 60, because above 60, there's a lot of palliation that sometimes happens, or there's a lot of drugs that someone's on that kind of makes my job harder. So I focus on women and children under the age of 60 and families. Let's go back to copper. So if we think of the female cycle, from day 0 to day 14, you are raising your estrogen, preparing to have enough estrogen in case you get pregnant, and growing your copper to day 14 at ovulation. And if you're not pregnant, then your progesterone is going to rise, and you don't need the estrogen anymore to be that high. The progesterone is going to rise, so you're going to have a mini cramp, for some people, very bad cramps, and a period. Excuse me. When someone has, I like to call that normal cycle day, 0, 14, 28. That is the grading scheme for all women. Your report card as a woman has one thing on it. I've told this to young women in my family and extended family. There's one report card for a woman, it's your menstrual cycle. A perfect menstrual cycle comes like clockwork on day 28. You have 3 to 4 days of rich red flow, no clotting, no leukorrhea, no itching, no PMS, and no cramps. And that's an A+ cycle. And anyone who can say, that's me, is fertile. Anything that's not in that formula, they're not fertile. If the PMS is through the roof, and I had a client once who needed to check into a hotel 2 days before her period because she was out of the box crazy. And her husband said, just go, okay, honey, it's time to go to Motel 6. Time to go. She would just be incredibly intense and then better with the flow. And that's what she had to do. And she came to me. I thought, well, that's expensive. That's expensive. And that's a little crazy. Your poor husband must be going nuts. Not to mention the kids are like, what's wrong with mommy? and she was embarrassed, but she was just certifiably intense. And we have a remedy for that called lachesis. It's made from a snake remedy, and it helps to balance the hormones, and they're always better with the flow, and they get very edgy and very intense and snappish. You think of a snake like that, striking before their period. So that's the menstrual cycle report card. Now, when there's lots of inflammation in the womb, what people don't realize is when you are on birth control for a long time, you have thinned your endometrial layer. It's so thin that you're more prone to infections. You're more prone to yeast. You're more prone to viral infections because it's too thin of an endometrial layer. So women on a birth control, technically, they don't have a cycle. They have a bleed. It's not a cycle, but they'll say, they'll have a bleed, but the endometrial layer is so thin that it's not protecting them as it should be, this rich red endometrial layer. So when you're on birth control, you are altering your very important copper and zinc ratio. When we go back to copper is not all bad. And I have to remind people, copper is not all bad. You can't get pregnant without good copper. But bad copper that is too high, and let's go back to the cycle, day 0, day 14, day 28. Let's say your stress level through that cycle is very manageable, and your copper goes up to, we're just going to pick a number, your copper goes up to a level 10. Great. No problem. Period comes. No problem. You're not on birth control. Business as usual. Now, let's say there's a tremendously stressful month. You have to move. You start a new job. Your mom is in the hospital, and your husband just got a notice that he might get laid off, and there's tremendous stress around you. And there's a pandemic also, for example. Now, your stress that would normally be 10 in the summer, on your vacation, that month off, taking it easy, is now a 40 or a 50. It's important to know the opposite of copper is potassium. And one of the minerals we lose in times of stress, we lose potassium, we lose magnesium, we lose sodium. The opposite of potassium is copper. So now our normal copper that was a 10 might be up at a 60. And now people will say, oh, all summer long I had no cramps. I'm a school teacher, had 3 months off. I was great. First month of school, my cramps are horrible. Stress is way higher. Copper is higher. Cramping is more intense. So there's an influence of emotions on copper because stress will deplete potassium and zinc, and those are the opposite of copper. Now, when we're thinking about the menstrual cycle, for women who have really heavy periods, or their periods are at the wrong time, they come too early, they come too late, those are all a sign of imbalance also. But in homeopathy, we always look at a mental emotional stress that will alter the minerals downstream, that will alter the body functions. Mm-hmm. So if someone is really, really stressed out, we might look at a remedy called Ignatia, which is a fantastic remedy. I hope everyone's writing that down. It's the number one remedy in the protocols that we use called the Banerjee protocols for anxiety, for depression, for grief. Post-pandemic, there's a lot of anxiety that influences infertility. Why? Because it's affecting that copper balance. It's affecting whether or not someone menstruates, etc. So when you take birth control, you raise your copper level and you become estrogen dominant, which means too high in estrogen, too low in progesterone. You become estrogen dominant 20 or 30 years before you're supposed to be. You become estrogen dominant, and the extra copper that is stored in your liver starts running out of space. So copper that it can't be used is called unbound copper, and it stores in your liver, and it takes up space and it clogs. I like to call the liver the 7-pound purse over your shoulder that you're carrying, the 7-pound organ that's supposed to be cleaning and filtering your blood, doing all kinds of functions, helping you digest your food. It's your tremendous detox organ. Well, when it's so filled with unbound copper, it's sluggish and it doesn't metabolize the hormones properly, and it's not working up to speed. So copper toxicity alters your liver function. It changes metabolically all kinds of things that are going on. When you run out of space in your liver, the backup is the brain. So we'll see women very often with anxiety. And what's fascinating to me is you'll have a girl who is starting her period age 11, age 12, and all of a sudden her anxiety is increasing with her menstrual cycle. And she's in high school and she's so anxious, never had a problem with it before. Her mother was on birth control. Her mother did a copper dump via the placenta. She managed to kind of get that lower, and now she's making her own copper, and she's flipped into anxiety because she was bequeathed through the gestational soup. The mother does a dump of copper through the placenta. And this is really hard to hear. And if you haven't had a baby yet, this is the most important thing I'm going to talk about. If you balance your copper before you get pregnant, you're going to have super baby, easy kids, smart kids, no ADHD, no anxiety, unless things get unraveled in their experience of life. But in terms of handing over ADHD to your boy, handing over anxiety to your girl, the way you prevent that is by detoxing your birth control, detoxing your unbound copper. Unbound copper is toxic copper. And very sadly, it is the root cause of all female cancers, high copper, unbound copper. It's the root cause. So if the three of us said we want to start a campaign to cure cancer, we don't need pink ribbons. We need 80 million women off of birth control. You watch the cancer rate drop dramatically. So yes, we have xenoestrogens, and people will talk about xenoestrogens and they'll talk about environmental toxins, and those are important. But there is no more of a poisoning that you could do than a birth control pill. That is a direct poisoning to yourself, to your offspring.
Also, also to mention the IUD, the copper IUD, because I think a lot of us think that we're doing better. And when you enlighten me that's actually like...
Thank you for mentioning that, because I've had clients who said, that first of all, they had problems with the IUD because, for some people, it's moving around, kind of slicing up the uterus, causing lacerations. And they're like, I'm taking Advil 3 times a day. I'm like, take the IUD out. The problem with a copper IUD is it's a direct deposit right through the hepatic vein, right to the liver. Boom, right in there. So birth control, I make a joke, they did have a pill for men that they came up with, and the men had side effects and forgot to take it and didn't want to do it. So they said, well, I guess we won't do that for the men. We'll just focus on the women. So birth control is controlling you. Mm-hmm. It is a control by Big Pharma. Think about at least 80 million women, and some people go on birth control at the age of 9 or 10, not because they're sexually active, because their mothers are so uninformed and their mothers are busy and working, and their moms were on birth control, and that's what they did. So they go, okay, honey, here you go. And because they have horrible periods. Mm-hmm. And we say, why does she have so much stress that her copper's so high that she's cramping so badly? And we find out, oh, she's being bullied at school. Oh, she secretly stays up on her phone, texting till 2 a.m. and she's getting 6 hours of sleep. Oh, the coach, cut her from the team because, her favorite sport, she's not on that team. Oh, someone stole her boyfriend, her date to the prom. So, all these things can happen that it impacts someone's emotions that cause this high stress and this increasing copper. So it's really hard, when you see young women who are put on the pill by mothers who don't know any better, they are setting them up for early cancer potential impact. And the IUDs know better. So what we have to do is think about, there's natural fertility methods. There's, the good old basic calendaring, fertility awareness, being aware of when you're fertile. Condoms are a great backup plan for anyone. If there's all kinds of things you can do besides birth control, but we are now taught in our culture. There's a Planned Parenthood in every town. It's free. Get your pill. We'll control you. And you are being controlled. Big Pharma is making millions of dollars and turning you into a future customer. What are you going to be a customer for?
IVF.
Anxiety meds? IVF for sure. There's the big, we'll talk about that. IVF, anxiety, and depression. So what happens with birth control is it depletes the 3 really, really important minerals that make your brain work and your body function. Zinc. Zinc funds the prefrontal cortex. I have the little rhyme I used to teach my kids. Zinc helps you think. Zinc is a precursor to progesterone. Zinc is a precursor to testosterone. It's an antiviral. It's needed for all sorts of brain functions and body functions. It's really, if you had to pick 2 minerals that were the 2 most important out of the 15 minerals in a hair test, I would say magnesium and zinc. Well, guess what 2 are depleted on birth control? Magnesium, zinc, and B6. So your calming B vitamins are depleted. Your magnesium, which is the mind mineral, the anti-anxiety mineral, because from magnesium you make the neurotransmitter GABA, your inner Buddha. No magnesium, no GABA, anxiety. So day after day of depleting those minerals, we would call birth control a mineral mugger. You will become more anxious. You'll have more ruminating thoughts, writing things down and not able to do them. Lists all over the place, or laying in bed, blink, blink, blink. Oh gosh, I wonder. This internal dialogue, and for many women, it's beautifully masked. They're trained professionals. They're masking how they really feel. You get them in a consultation, they're blubbering with they're just sobbing hysterically. I can't do this anymore. It's so hard. And, I could do it at work. Can't do it at home anymore. I can't do this. So there's a lot of compensations that women will do, and you'll see them and they'll look and act totally normal, but one-on-one, they'll tell you the real story. So we have to be careful that birth control is going to be a mineral mugger and a toxin. How could we get any worse than to electively do that? And it's elective. Mm-hmm. It's not required. So it's an elective choice, mostly uninformed. If women knew the impact, they would never do it. And there is no informed consent. I would liken birth control, especially on a younger woman, like under the age of 16, not sexually active. I would liken that with a vaccine injury. Not informed consent, not understanding what you're going to do to your own body and to your offspring. Mm-hmm. That copper dump is so profound. I want to say in my practice, I'm a specialist in autism recovery and also vaccine injury. And of the autistic children that I have treated in my practice in 20 years, I've had 3 girls, and all of the rest have been firstborn males whose mothers were on birth control. Absolutely every single one of those women were on birth control. So when you do a copper dump, you are giving copper toxicity to all the tissues of your child, including their brains. And I think of copper as if you've ever watched those tournaments with the Chinese ping pong matches, how fast that ball goes back and forth. Well, that's sort of what's going on in the brain. And you burn through synapses. And you get ADHD little boys with ants in their pants, and babies who don't sleep, and little kids who give me your iPhone. They're addicted to gaming. They need they got a dopamine addiction. The synapses don't work. The serotonin doesn't work. They're not calm. They're not focused. They're hyper. They're wild, and they've been set up that way. So when the kids come in, the first question I ask about the autistic child, who we know has been injured 99% of the time by vaccines, the aluminum in the vaccines joining the copper in the brain, creating what I call the Chinese ping pong match and the French tennis open. And we wonder why they can't focus. And I'll tell you one thing that's very different. 20 years ago, we had children with autism who were quiet, detached in the corner. There's no child like that I've treated in the last 15 years. They're hyper wild autistic. So ADHD, autism, that hyperactivity. We think about I tell people, think about those cute commercials with the Energizer Bunny, the copper top battery. He's clapping that little bunny. Remember those ads? Mm-hmm. That's what's going on in the brains of the little kids whose moms have been on birth control. So that's why we detox it. And should I talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Do you have any questions you want to ask? Should I take some questions now or anything in that regard?
I am curious about the copper cramping. So when you are in labor having a natural birth, when you're going through those cramps, you're releasing the copper. Is that correct?
Well, it's funding the labor. So just think about it. What a perfect design. What a perfect design.
Cool. Very interesting.
How else are you going to expel the baby?
Right.
It's perfect design. God's perfect. Right. And any other questions?
No, I think that was perfect. I love all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all very, I'm learning a lot and it's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. And so we were going to talk about, what did I say we're going to talk about? As I'm so
what does a birth control detox, how important is that? What does it look like? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So first of all, I do for people who are interested in doing that, I have done hundreds of women. I've got a page on my website that talks about the birth control detox with testimonials. One of the interesting testimonies there was from a woman in Colorado who had her birth control 20 years ago. And I was treating her son for issues and ADHD, and her daughter for anxiety, as teenager anxiety. We connect the dots. And I said, while I'm treating them for the vaccine injury and the ADHD and the anxiety, why don't we just do a birth control detox for you? Oh, it was 20 years ago. I said, let's just do it. And, you're free. I'm doing the 2 kids. Let's just do it. Buy the remedies. You know what you're doing. Ho, did she have improvements? And what she felt was ownership of her body. Ownership. Like she was back into before the pill, where she was in charge and felt more empowered and felt grounded. So if I have an opportunity to work with a family and the woman has been on birth control, I don't care if it was 20 years ago, there is damage to your energetic and spiritual body. And we can fix it in 10 weeks. So why wouldn't we? So a birth control detox cycle looks like someone contacting me. The first thing I do is have them do a brief medical history. And it's not so brief, it's a lot of work, but brief meaning I don't need everything but the kitchen sink. But it's a very detailed form. And one of the things that surprises everyone who does it, I'm looking for the nuts and bolts, who you are, kind of what you eat, how you sleep. Your homeopaths care about everything. When you do a brief medical history for a homeopath, I've had people say, no one ever asked me anything like that in my life. I said, well, that's because they're not homeopaths. So, what position do you sleep? What are your favorite foods? Where do you sweat? What do you crave? What are you afraid of? What are your fears? Mm-hmm. Right? One of the most important questions on my intake is, what is your most significant trauma? Because from that trauma, a lot of times that trauma is connected to someone's infertility. And it may be a very indirect connection, but there is a connection. So I get the brief medical history that's not so brief. I look at vaccine history, how long you're on birth control, what type, antibiotics, antidepressants, any kind of prescription drugs. I also look at recreational drugs, because when we're detoxing someone and preparing them for pregnancy, sometimes we'll do a birth control detox. That's the most important one to do first because it's hormonal. For women, birth control, steroids, most important. Then if they've had a lot of antibiotics because they went to grad school and they got exhausted and they were in, Michigan and getting strep throat 4 times every year and they're on antibiotics, that's altered the gut. That's created biofilms of strep. I'll do the antibiotics, antivirals. Some people have Lyme. They've been on birth control and they've been on antibiotics and they have Lyme disease and they have Epstein-Barr and they have Hashimoto's and they have all of these things going on. But the first thing we do is birth control. It takes 10 weeks. And in that cycle, what we're doing that's so fascinating, this is called a homeopathic detox protocol. And I've been trained in these with following a cease therapy, which I'm certified in, and a modification of that, which is homeopathic detox therapy. And I've added my own bells and whistles to make it incredibly efficient. So in about 3 months, I can do more in 3 months with my method of detoxing than I used to be able to do in 3 years. Because when people come to me and they want to have a baby, they want to have a baby 3 years ago. Mm. They don't want to wait 3 more years. They're like, no, I can't do it, Kari. If I say, well, we can detox you, we can do 2 or 3 detox cycles, and in a year, you can start preparing for your super baby, they're very interested. So once we've done that detox, I can help women get pregnant through my fertility boosting program, 80% success rate in 6 cycles, if you've done the birth control detox. That's where the rubber hits the road. You can't get pregnant, and you don't want to get pregnant if you have a history of undetoxed birth control. Who would want to dump copper and have an ADHD feminized boy? No one would sign up for that. Why do we say feminized? Estrogen is a female hormone. It will crowd out testosterone, and you will have a feminized male. No one wants that. It's well known, and you can see in a hair test. I've done hair tests on little children, copper flying out of their hair from their mom. I could do a hair test on a baby that's 1 month old, and I can tell that she's had birth control. Very interestingly, I did a hair test on a woman who was a single mom, very young, 19 years old. Dad got her pregnant and split, and her son had autism, ADHD. And I said, I got to do a hair test on him because I suspected some drug abuse. And lo and behold, this little boy was just, the cadmium coming out of his hair was ridiculous, and the copper. So he was cadmium toxic. And I said to the mom, well, how many joints did you smoke a day while you were pregnant? Not did you, but how many? She goes, 1 or 2 to stay calm. I was so stressed out. I said, well, your baby has begun the garbage dump from your cadmium, which comes from cigarettes and marijuana, and your copper. We could just see it. It was black and white on the hair test. So we had several challenges with him. But back to the detox cycle. So we look at what I do is I support the gut. So I typically have, we have what we call an opening remedy to sort of prime the energetic pump and turn off the destructive cycle. It's a remedy called syphilinum. I won't get too much into remedies, but it turns off the destructive nature of what happens when you suppress a natural exit in your body of blood flow at the period and the hormonal balancing that results from it. Let's remember, the womb is also a toxic exit. Toxins will leave through the womb that have been gathered. That's an exit for toxins. We wouldn't want to stop being able to poop, stop being able to pee. Well, women on birth control are really losing that third exit. It's a very important exit that we never are taught, we don't think about. So we would do an opening remedy to sort of reset energetically the destructiveness of birth control and say, no, we're energetically resetting all of those genes that you turn on when you inherit a set of genes from both sides, and they're either silent or they're not. We don't control the genes we get, but we can control if we're turning them on or off. When we lose zinc and magnesium and B6, there are certain genes that we've inherited that we don't want to turn on. They could be cancer genes, they could be Alzheimer's genes, they could be other genetics that are turned on in the absence of the appropriate minerals that help keep taking metals out of the body. Zinc is the opposite of mercury. Zinc is the opposite of copper. So if you don't have enough zinc, how are you going to help continuously detox those? So I add minerals based on the hair test to help remineralize the body, preparing it to be a better pregnancy receptacle. So the gestational soup, just the same way you would make a nice, nutritious broth, right? We're going to add the minerals so that you have a beautiful gestational soup to offer your child. Mm-hmm. Then, so we would use minerals on a daily basis. I would do a hair test. We would do the minerals on a daily basis. There's also an important product now that I'm adding in the last year or so called Numi. It's on my website is numi.com/alternative health experts, where you can get discounts for that on auto ship. And that's a very important nanoglutathione to help bind toxins at a cellular level. So we need glutathione in every single cell of our body. It's produced in the liver. If our liver is sluggish with unbound copper, do we produce enough glutathione? The answer is no. How could we? And after age 18, for every 10 years, we lose 10% of our glutathione production. So At 20, at 30, you've lost already 20%. So I put the glutathione in because it's a beautiful, I call it the empty the garbage supplement, helping make sure that the garbage is emptied. And because it's 100% absorbed into the mucus, almost like a homeopathic, but not quite, but it's 100% absorbed because it's nano. It is outperforms a glutathione IV, which women use for cancer treatment 3 times a week. Those can cost anywhere from $150 to $250 per injection, and it only lasts 72 hours. A lot of movie stars in Hollywood get glutathione injections every week to keep their skin beautiful. So Numi, there's a skin spray that I personally use, and a lot of my friends over 40 use, and also just the Numi nanoglutathione to help keep the detox going for those of us who are older, who are losing our glutathione production, which means you're binding chemicals and EMF and pesticides and all of the junk that's going around us. It's just one more thing to just keep emptying the garbage every day. Mm-hmm. A lot of things that I do with my birth control detox are about opening up detox channels. Liver, kidney, lung, and lymph. I have people think about a swimming pool that has 4 drains: liver, kidney, lung, and lymph. And the main drain is the adrenals. So when someone is so exhausted, it shows immediately on their hair test. The sodium, salt to magnesium ratio is bottomed out. A normal ratio is a 4. Most of the women in my practice are below a 1. They're below 25% function on adrenals, and they've probably been in that way in a long time. So think about it. What would it be like to get pregnant, luckily, to hold the baby past the first trimester, amazingly, because if we don't have enough progesterone, because the estrogen's too high in our bodies, how our stress is high, how do we keep the baby in before the umbilical cord is formed? You don't. So a lot of women get pregnant and then they have a very sad miscarriage, mm-hmm. which is even more heartbreaking. So when we're doing a fertility program, the first thing I say, I have to take the brief medical history, look at the birth control, plan which detox cycle, always going to be birth control first. And I tell them, don't get pregnant. Do not get pregnant. They're like, what? Do not get pregnant, because now that you know what junk is in your trunk, the last thing you want to do, there can be a miraculous conception. Okay. If God wants you to have a baby, you're going to have a baby, but I'm saying, please don't try to get pregnant. Try not to get pregnant during these 6 months, because while we're cleaning everything up, you don't want your fetus to be a dumping ground for toxins, because you will dump 2/3 of your body burden into that babe, first pregnancy, 2/3, which is why a lot of first pregnancies, especially nowadays, are born to heaven babies. I want to add a little segue here. I've suffered from 2 miscarriages, and I know how heartbreaking that can be. And there's a lot of women who might be listening to this at some point who have the heartbreak of not getting pregnant, but then being pregnant. Not quite at the point where they could tell someone, except close family and friends. They weren't showing. First trimester is very common, more and more common now. And then you have this heartbreak. But there's a wonderful website called Shrine of the Holy Innocents in New York City. And there is a church there, a Catholic church, where you can go to that website and put the name of your unborn, whether through miscarriage or abortion. And you can put the name of your unborn and the birth date, and they have a mass on the last day of the month, every month, for the unborn. They send you a beautiful certificate. And I found that very comforting personally, and I've referred a lot of people to that, even people who had losses, stillborn babies and full-term babies who didn't make it. And those are incredibly traumatic and sad. But that seems to be a helpful thing for some people to have some closure, especially with a miscarriage. So we're going back to the detox. I'm jumping around a little bit. We start with the opening remedy to turn off the destructive nature. We're doing the minerals. We've done hair testing, so we know what we're doing. There's no guesswork. Yes.
Can we just also mention the megapotency that you use before the opening? Because that is pretty...
Yes. So because I've asked someone about, thank you, Bethany, because I've asked someone about their biggest trauma, one of the biggest additions to my practice in the last several years has been the use of very, very, very high potencies for 12 important homeopathic remedies. And these remedies are to release guilt, shock, and grief related to emotional events. So a lot of times a woman who is not able to conceive has a very high grief level. And the remedy we would use is Natrum muriaticum in a 10 mm potency. That's a 10 million seed. So we have our body, we have our relationships with others, and then we have this astral body, this energetic field that goes all around us. And it is possible to be carrying grief and trauma from your ancestors. I've worked with children of parents who are in the Holocaust, and they need a remedy to help release some of that grief and trauma. The same way you can pass on an alcohol gene for 4 generations, you can pass on a trauma gene. So people who have parents who have left their homeland and emigrated to the United States, their children and their children's children may still have this energy of the loss of the homeland, the loss of the motherland, the grief of leaving everyone behind if they were a refugee, for example. Natrum muriaticum is very important for someone who was adopted, who is going to try to conceive, because there's a whole host of complicated, well, why didn't my mother want me? What was that story all about? Because I want a baby, but she didn't want me. And we have to resolve that in order for that woman to have a healthy pregnancy. So I do a megapotency, and those are done under, it's possible to do those without guidance, but I like people to do them with guidance. So we do that for about a week. And I want to share one of the most amazing stories I had on a megapotency where I'm certain that they work. And for some people, they work more profoundly. It was for aconite, which is for ailments from fright. And I had a mother with 4 children, a homeschooling mom who was exhausted, who'd been on birth control for 15 years before she had her children. She had 4 children, her firstborn son, very ADD, ADHD, and wet the bed. 10 years old, still wetting the bed every night. So I knew, okay, copper dump on the boy, very lacking confidence, not confident in himself, not enough zinc, copper dump, anxious mom, horrible periods, cystic acne. She was a poster child for all of the symptoms of copper toxicity, from the anxiety to the depression, to the horrible periods, to the cystic acne, to the stomach problems, to the, big thick clots every period. And she was just the loveliest person with a lot of personal trauma. Well, I asked her about her son. I said, well, was he wanted? Yes. Was it easy to get pregnant? Yes. Okay. What happened at the delivery? Oh, I said, was anything traumatic? And she said, well, would this count? I was in the hospital, and I was delivering my baby, and they were locked down with a shooter on the premises. And I said, absolutely, that counts. That's got to be the most traumatic birth that I've ever heard. But we could also have a cord wrapped around the neck. We could also have a blue baby. We could also have too fast of a labor, which is great for the mom, but it's very traumatic for the child. Like contractions wake you up, get the hormones moving, get the baby prepared, out the gate sliding out is very traumatic. And just being born is traumatic. So I gave this boy an aconite 10 mm for about, I said, do it for 2 weeks. We can do that one up to 30 days. And right around day 10, bedwetting completely stopped, didn't come back. Fantastic story. Because his trauma and grief was from that birth experience. That, and we hold our trauma in the limbic system, and it's re-stimulated in times of stress. So if you've ever noticed when you're anxious and something else goes on, or you have a kind of a PTSD response, you remember the other things that didn't go well. Mm-hmm. Those kind of negative people who say, oh, and this and this and this. Well, when you're in pain or you're in trauma and you're re-stimulating that part of your brain, the hypothalamus is going to give up the negative memories first. Mm-hmm. And when you're trying to get pregnant and your period comes and you're not pregnant, then every time you didn't get pregnant comes. And we use a remedy. So I tell people that's when you take the Ignatia. My period came, I'm not pregnant, take the Ignatia twice a day for 3 days, get back on the wagon, call me, let's do a detox. And if we don't need a detox, then there's other things. Certainly we can do the fertility program. They're combined. So the birth control detox includes a homeopathic lab that makes a combination remedy out of all types of birth control. So let's say someone said, well, I don't even remember the pill I was on. It was 15 years ago, and I was on 4 different ones plus an IUD. No problem. That homeopathic combo will cover all birth control types. It doesn't matter if you can't remember. If it was an IUD, that's in there. All the different types are covered. And the frequencies of those chemicals are in the tincture, potentized, dropped on the pills, and they will resonate and help reduce and reboot the female hormonal system. And we do an ascending potency from a 30C to a 200 to a 1 to a 10 over 10 weeks. And by the end of that, after we've opened with the megapotency for releasing the biggest trauma that people talk about. Later on, I'll go through several other megapotencies, because usually people don't just have one. They'll have more than one, but the biggest one, like say fright or mortification. Very often, a remedy called Staphylos aureus or Natmer is needed for infertility. Natmer is just deep grief. I'm not pregnant. Will I ever get pregnant? Everyone else has a baby. If I buy one more baby shower gift, I'm going to punch someone in the face. I have to pretend that it's okay, but I really hate doing this. Oh, my sister-in-law is having her third. They want me to be a godmother. I'm like, I don't want to be a godmother. We know how it feels. So the megapotency Staphylos aureus is for mortification, insult, and medical mortification, where you kind of learn after you're watching this, wow, no one told me this. What the heck? I call it the what the heck remedy. Mm-hmm. What the heck? How come no one told me this? How am I supposed to know this? How come my doctor gave me birth control? Why did I take those shots? I didn't know about the Gardasil shot was loaded with aluminum. I didn't know that could give me ovarian failure. I thought I was doing the right thing. We can talk a little bit about the Gardasil shots. Those are a mess, loaded with aluminum, and they cause premature ovarian failure. That's a side effect. It's known. So for some women, we'll do the detox of the Gardasil too. And that will be very important, because who wants to dump a bunch of aluminum? In fact, those shots have the highest aluminum content, except for the combo pediatric ones of any shots. They're very damaging. Very damaging. So the aluminum is a big deal. I mean, who wants to do an aluminum dump on your baby? No. And once you're working with me, you understand the dangers of vaccination. And I also teach mothers to be how they can do a homeopathic immunization program that protects for every single disease in a systematic dosing schedule using homeopathic remedies for those diseases to teach the immune system of the baby what that frequency is to boost their immunity without any shots. I've done hundreds of people. So when you're working with someone like myself, you're going through what I call the wormhole. You're like, what? I had no idea. And I was a person, I went through that wormhole 25 years ago, and I was like, how did I not know this? How did I not know this? And things are shifting. Remember, there was no internet then. Mm-hmm. Now there's an internet. Now we know. Before, if you had a child with ADHD, it was a vaccine injury. You got the stink eye. You were a bad mom. You didn't know how to control your kid. Put them on Ritalin, right? You couldn't get pregnant. Copper toxicity. What's that? You don't know what you're talking about. No, there was no discussion. Hair testing was around. That knowledge was around, but it wasn't available. And homeopaths did not have these structured detox cycles because the labs didn't make the products. So only in the last 8 years or so could I get the products to do these kind of efficient detox cycles. Otherwise, we're just doing one remedy, waiting. And so I can do, like I said, I can do 3 years of work in about 9 months, which is exciting. I mean, and we'll talk, so we're doing that opening remedy, that mega potency, and then we're doing a systematic dosing up the scale with a very specific dosing cycle that is so complicated and takes too much time for me to teach one-on-one that I have someone take my class. Mm-hmm. So someone who's a client with me, the first thing should I talk about pricing or no?
No.
No. So you contact me, you do a brief medical history, and then if I say, yes, I can help you, I will know in that brief medical history, I personally can help you. And if I can't, I will tell someone, I'm sorry, based on my years of experience, I'm not the right person for you, but I'll help you find someone else. So to be fair, I know a lot of people, and I can tell if I can help someone and if I will help someone. So if I can, I'm never going to waste anyone's time or mine. I'm 65. I don't have time to waste. So I'll lovingly put them in the right hands. Then we'll do the detox cycle. First for birth control, and then maybe antibiotics, maybe Gardasil vaccine, if that was given, that will come right with the antibiotics also. And so after that cycle, what's exciting, as you go through the cycle, remember what did we say was the report card for women? Their menstrual cycle. Okay. If you were an F, like you didn't have a period, the next month you're a D plus. The next month you're C minus. Your period came, but had horrible cramps and lots of clots. The next month you're a B minus. Period came, it was on day 32, but the clots weren't so bad and the cramps weren't so terrible and I wasn't so moody. The next month you move up in your grading scale till by the time you're done with that detox cycle, about the next period or so, boom, on time, no cramps, no clots, rich red flow means the endometrium is thick enough for an implantation. That's exciting. So you see, it's not like, we wait and then it happens. No, it's happening as we're going. And people are checking in once a month and they're telling me what's happening. I'm like, great, you're tracking great. That's exactly. So there's no mystery of what improvements will I see. Do I wait for them? No, it's not like, and then I have the baby. No, you're getting better. No, and then by about that 6-month mark, I would say about the 4-month mark that you've done the detox. And if that's the only big problem, that's if you've never had vaccines as an adult, no antibiotics, just birth control, then you would start your fertility boosting program, which is a very precise, different one. I'll talk a tiny bit about that, since we're kind of focusing more on birth control detox. But when you start that program, then right when you're finishing the birth control detox, now comes the fertility awareness. You are in your body. You got your A report card and you're not going to mess with that report card. I had one client who had a perfect menstrual cycle. She did birth control detox and did this. She's a young woman and she started doing some bodybuilding and got exhausted physically. And so for the first time in her life, and working with me, and for a long time, the cycle was late. And she was really like, oh my gosh, I'm not pregnant. Oh my gosh. I'm like, well, look at the amount of exercise and the dieting for this bodybuilding, the toll that it took on you. Your body just gave you the message. You don't have the energy to be pregnant. I'm not going to let you have you don't get an A plus. This is not good for your fertility. You might feel great and feel super empowered and all of those things, but this is a liability for fertility. And we know if body fat gets too low, women don't ovulate because God in his great wisdom is not going to let you have a baby that you can't bring to fruition. Your first job is to be a fertile female. Everything is geared around that. So if there's too much stress, you won't get pregnant because your adrenals are crashed. If there's too much toxicity and you'll probably have a miscarriage. That's a merciful miscarriage, right? Because that baby could not survive with the toxicity and things going on. So a lot of times, all of these things are hard to hear. And if you go into IVF, that talk about a moneymaker there. I had someone come to me who had 7 failed IVFs, who then got pregnant in 4 months in my program. 7 failed IVFs. But the amount of Clomid estrogen toxicity that comes with the Clomid and the fertility drugs to get enough eggs is a massive amount. So if someone came to me and they had a birth control history and a history of fertility treatments with Clomid, I would detox the birth control and the fertility drugs to clear the body so that you're not doing a copper toxic drug dump on your baby. For a lot of people, the goal is just get me pregnant anyway. So my goal is help me get a super baby. Totally different perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Super baby versus getting pregnant. Very, very different. Should we talk about anything else that I haven't covered, Bethany?
I just have one question that I think you would have an interesting perspective on. So, what about the people that I know of and people probably know of that aren't the healthiest, like don't have the A+ report card, like you look at their lifestyle, you're like, whoa, and they get pregnant and they have babies, like they carry them to term. Maybe they're premature, maybe like, and who knows what they look like down the road. But like what explains that? Like, phenomenon?
Okay, let's talk about that. So I'm proud to say that on my 2 pregnancies that were born, my husband and I had great intention. And I kind of said, I think if we make love tonight, are you ready to make a baby with me? He said, absolutely. Boom, I was pregnant. The same thing happened with my second child. The intention was there, the spiritual intention to invoke that baby. And I believe parents pick their children. Mm-hmm. So they picked us and there they were. The younger the person is, the easier it is to get pregnant. So if you're talking about, these teenage girls, whoops, they got pregnant. Well, they're not conscious of their birth control. I mean, they don't really know when their cycle is. They know what their fertility is. They're not on the pill. They get pregnant. That's more common because they're just young. And they're also, to some extent, lucky. The statistics right now, I can't quote the exact number, but I think it's about 60%. They're talking about 60% of women will struggle now with infertility. Mm-hmm. They won't be able to get pregnant because of stress and the factors of toxicity, factors of birth control, factors of a lot of antibiotics, things like that. So for the people who do get pregnant, I think God bless you. Good luck. Mm-hmm. Because that's not going to be a super baby. Mm-hmm. So that's a baby. Mm-hmm. And depending on the amount of vaccines that child is given, depending on, maybe the mom didn't eat the best food, depending on a million factors, I'm a Christian and I believe that, all of our days were written down in the book before we came to be. And those children and those pregnancies were designed by God to come to fruition. But do you want a super baby? And I don't mean a super achiever. I mean a calm, centered, conscious, aware, empowered child. Someone who can pack their backpack, make their bed, go to school without you mollycoddling them about sitting with every homework assignment. Someone who can become an independent, enlightened, empowered adult, right? And I have pretty high standards when I talk about what a super baby looks like. But I have several people in my practice who got pregnant with their second or third in my practice after they'd already had the first and the second child. And they were like, this pregnancy was totally better. It was totally easier. This baby, he's so much smarter. He's doing so much more than the other two. It's so amazing. And we all just love him to death. And he's got sort of this energy about him. They'll talk about this energy about their third or fourth child that was born after birth control detox in a more natural way. So I have a high standard for my clients, and there's all kinds of whoops babies out there. In fact, I've had women come in my practice to do detox work. And I said, be careful. You're going to be more fertile after we do these detoxes, even though you don't want to get pregnant. Be careful. And they go, no, I'm careful. Whoops. I have about 5 whoops babies. Someone with 6 had the 7th. Someone with 5 had the 6th. Someone with 4 had the 5th. Someone with 3 had the 4th. They weren't planning on it. And I warned them. I want to share a really important concept that sometimes people say, well, I would love to work with someone like you, but I don't have the money. I'm like, that's okay. You can do a hair test for $195. You don't have to do a consultation with me about it. You can swallow those supplements. That's all you're going to do. If you have the discipline and you don't, some people say, I don't need a coach. I don't need someone holding my hand. I'm not that complicated. Great. Do a hair test. If you've had birth control, do a hair test. Start the supplements and plan on staying them diligently for a year. Purchase the Numi. Plan on staying that a minimum of a year. And then we have a Banerjee protocol available at Homeopathic Remedies Online for infertility. That is a very basic, simple protocol. It's very affordable, including the remedy sepia, which is a huge remedy for infertility. And if someone says, well, that's all I can afford to do, that we offer that for people to say, well, there's your package. Hair test, supplements, Numi, Banerjee protocol. You don't need someone like me if you want to try it on your own. And I've had people be successful that way. right? But I think if you have challenged infertility and you've had vaccines and antibiotics and birth control, after you've listened to this lecture, this webinar, you'll be like, well, I don't want to pass on that stuff to my baby. So, for people who have to do reading therapy and ADHD therapies and learning disabilities, if you have any idea of what those cost per hour, if you have a child with learning differences, it's ridiculously expensive. IVF is ridiculously expensive. So it's sort of where do you want to spend the money so that you don't spend the money for a long period of time? And then you're avoiding, of course, when you get into the holistic lifestyle of homeopathy, you're not going to be taking the other drugs. Most of the people in my practice, well, if they work with me, they'll have the homeopathic remedy kit with 50 remedies that you can buy at Homeopathic Remedies online. It comes with my free ebook and a quick dosing guide. And then my website itself is a huge website that has what remedy is used for at least 100 common health conditions. So if you have the remedy kit, you're like, oh, I have a bad headache. You go to my website, look up headache. It'll tell you which remedy has the headache on the left that feels like a hammer, which headache has it in the back of the head, which headache has a throbbing in the vertex. Because in homeopathy, we don't have one thing. We have lots of things for a condition based on the person. So it's not a one size fits all, but on a protocol for detoxing birth control, everyone who comes with me with birth control poisoning gets the same protocol because they all have that foundational problem. That's the problem that we're fixing. Mm-hmm. So when we fix that problem, right, you're a unique individual who all have had that poisoning problem. Same way with antibiotics or vaccines, it can be done that way. So any more questions or things we should continue talking about?
No, I was just looking over the notes and I'm like, I think we really hit all of it really good too. Like really thoroughly. Yeah, I think you really did, unless there's anything that...
Well, I think I would just encourage people to really take a look at, I think the pandemic has taught us that we need ownership of our bodies. We need empowered choices. We need to be awake and not drugged with antidepressants, which are mineral muggers, and anxiety meds, which are mineral muggers, and birth control, because, well, that's what they told us to do. I think we're in a new dawning now where people are saying, wait a second, I don't know if I can trust you to tell me what to do, because I saw what happened. Didn't go well for a lot of people, and I'm not trusting. And out of that lack of trust, we can trust ourselves and our creator and how our bodies were designed. I think there's this huge rebirthing now that I'm seeing. People who never would reach out to me for homeopathic help are coming saying, hey, I heard about homeopathy because I don't want to do this anymore. I've been thinking this through after the pandemic. So I think that's really exciting. And being able to take back, as women, taking ownership of your body and your cycle. We are probably the only culture, the only country, US, that doesn't really celebrate female fertility. Every culture for thousands of years has had fertility rites. In some of the African cultures, as soon as your period comes, your dad is giving you the choice pieces of meat because you're going to be getting that zinc out of that meat and you're going to be the mother of the next generation. You are honored. You are acknowledged for this gift, for this power of being a receptacle of the next generation of human life. And in our culture, I feel like a lot of young women, they're like, oh, I hate my period. It's such a hassle. I don't want to have kids anyway. Who cares? And it's really unfortunate because I think women now are under such enormous stress to outperform men. There's way more women going to college than men. There's way more women executives now moving up the ranks than men in the workforce. And all of this is taking a toll away from what we said is our first and most important job, is to be a fertile female, acting on it or not. If you are protecting your fertility, you're really protecting your health, right? And so just coming to terms with being mindful of your cycle and what it looks like, being in that rhythm. And once you are detoxing from the birth control, it's not uncommon. People tell me this all the time, that you feel like you want the baby. Your husband starts resonating, hey, let's have that baby. Hey, let's do that. When you've gone through that experience of getting ownership and getting the rhythm, there is a rhythm that is a natural, God-given, sustainable rhythm that women are supposed to have. And I think our culture doesn't celebrate that nearly enough. So I love what you women are about, just bringing the consciousness to it that we can be celebrated. And, and then the other side of it is menopause. Like menopause is supposed to be.
I was just asking about that.
Okay, well,
I was just going to say,
collecting consciousness. So if it's like we're not supposed to love our bodies, and then you get in menopause, it's like, oh my God, if it wasn't bad enough being a mom and getting pregnant, going through fertility or miscarriage or whatever, and now your kids are in their 20s, a lot of women start later. They start having their baby. I had a baby when I was 41. Okay, so that means I'm 65. I have a 23-year-old, right? I should be a grandma. Mm-hmm. And my child used to say sometimes at high school, hey, her grandma's your age. I'm like, shut up. I know that. And that's why I'm tired. I would like to have been the grandma. It just didn't work out. I didn't find the man, the perfect partner and the perfect father for my children until I was 36. So I did the best I could, But menopause is no cakewalk either. And what happens in menopause is those hormonal imbalances are exacerbated because now the adrenals, the adrenals are doing the double lifting of trying to make a little bit of estrogen because the ovaries are off. And when the adrenals are exhausted and the ovaries are not producing anymore, you are really struggling with adrenal fatigue and the hot flashes and all that crazy stuff. But homie, believe it or not, I'm gonna just give this pearl. Write this down, anyone who's listening. The friend of all women. If a woman comes to me and I had no brief medical history and I listened to her for 5 minutes and I was forced with a gun at my head to write a prescription, I would say sepia, the ink of the cuttlefish. Sepia is the remedy that is safe for that exhausted teenager who can't get out of bed, who's crying and bitchy at the same time, and anxious in high school and doing sports and a 4.0 and theater and dance class, and she's exhausted. And she's a female exhausted. To the person trying to get pregnant, not able to the mom with 4 kids and just wants to get in the car and the truck and just head south and never come back, just fed up. To the businesswoman who's flying on airplanes and telling the nanny what to do and coming home and trying to clean the garage and go to the soccer games. To the grandma in menopause, to the woman in menopause, right? Sepia is a female life cycle remedy because it comes from the ink of the cuttlefish. And I want to tell the story of the ink of the cuttlefish. So we have something called the doctrine of signatures in homeopathy that says sometimes something in nature looks like an organ of the body. Well, a cuttlefish is an octopus and it's shaped like a uterus. Isn't that interesting? That's that same kind of shape. So we know, it works with the uterus. So the ink of the cuttlefish is rich in minerals, in precursor to dopamine, precursor to serotonin, rich in minerals, zinc, copper. It's a one-stop vitamin shop in a tiny little homeopathic pill. If I drove a truck up to your house with all those nutrients, said, here, take this for today, this is how much you need, you're like, I can't possibly eat all of that produce and all those minerals. Well, you can take 2 of these little innocent pills and basically have a truckload of the frequency that you would have gotten. So the ink of the cuttlefish, think of an octopus doing 20 things at once, okay? You're going to get off this call, you're going to throw in a load of laundry, you need to go walk the dog, you're going to make lunch, you need to answer some emails, you're going to go do this, and I'm going to do that, and we're going to be like going. And then your husband wants to have intimacy with you at the end of the day. You're like, what? So a lot of times, one of the keynotes of sepia, I'll say, if I told you you'd never had to have sex again in your life and it was okay, how would you feel? And a woman says, that's fine with me. That's a sepia exhausted woman with no sexual energy who's flatlined. So when the cuttlefish has their babies, they after they've birthed, they squirt black ink at the at the babies and they run away. So the energy of the sepia is, I'm done with this. It's too much. It's too hard. And so loss of hair in pregnancy, this is something for before pregnant, during pregnant, you take it the whole pregnancy under guidance, where homeopathic remedies are perfectly safe. It helps tone the uterus. Some women have a baby and they feel like their uterus is falling out. They have prolapse, pulls the muscles back up. It's the primary fundamental female reproductive second chakra remedy. So if someone told me I could only have 2 remedies to work with women, just 2, you can only have 2, Kari, out of 5,000, without hesitation, I would say, give me the sepia in a 200. If I could only get one potency in one remedy, give me a sepia 200, give me an ignatia 200. And if someone had those 2 remedies as a woman, and you are on a deserted island, I think you could have a decent life for the grief and shock and trauma and stress, and for just keeping pumping out those babies and doing your domestic duties, right? The image that we have of the image that I draw of a sepia is sort of a Downton Abbey manner with the rich lady who's hired a cleaning lady who's pregnant with a toddler on her sling and 2 kids playing while she's stepping in the dishpan by hand and washing the clothes for the lady of the manor. That's the sepia energy. Too much for everyone else, and mothering and creating and working. And I think the average woman right now says, that's me. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, 200 years. But so the takeaway is sepia, getting you started. And if someone was listening to this and they got really sad, ignatia, and if they got really mortified, saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea, I made every mistake there is, I feel, why didn't they tell me, I feel so bad, that's a staphysagria, like mortified from medical mortification or feeling assaulted by the medical system. So those 3 are really important for women. But I would say sepia, I just took one yesterday, I have it in my bottle that I sip, so it's a friend to all females. And it's not just for women, but it's definitely first place for females.
And I think what we'll do is we'll add all those in the show notes so people, because sometimes the spelling can be lost with these words. Like for me, at least, I was like, whoa, the spelling is so different than sometimes how it sounds.
And if you could just put the hair testing HTMA website and then the NUMI/alternative health experts and then homeopathic remedies online. Those are sites that I'm associated with. And homeopathy for women. Yeah. People can reach out. Sometimes I have a waiting list. It's just how it goes. But sometimes people move up to the top of the waiting list, depending on what their urgency and their story is. So don't let that discourage you. That's just me being honest. And sometimes it has people not come to me who are impatient, and that works too. So if I need someone now, well, then I'm not your person, But when I make a relationship with someone, it's for a year. It's for a year. I make a commitment to be their homeopath for a year. So when you're 65, I'm making a commitment till I'm 66. If someone starts right now, I'm making a commitment every year, and I'm going to be here for a long time because I love what I do, and I love stories. I could tell stories. I have so many stories. My family, they're tired of hearing them. I had time to write just down anecdotal stories, but I have quite a few testimonials on my website if people wanted to read that, or they can read some about the birth control. But I think the last thing I want to say is I want people to know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a homeopathic mentor. I didn't have someone to give me one pearl that could have changed my whole mothering for toddlers and babies and pregnancies. I didn't have it. I want to say one more thing. There's a remedy called pulsatilla that I used 3 times to flip a breech baby, confirmed with ultrasound 3 times in a row. I had 2 breech babies. If someone had told me I could have flipped that baby and had a natural delivery and not a C-section, I would have been all over it. I didn't know. But so what I've learned is, I don't have as much time because I'm still full-time in practice, but I appreciate this opportunity. For every drug that exists, this in closing, there's a homeopathic remedy that does the same thing with no side effects.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the take home. The only thing that we don't know is how fast it will work, how much time it will take, but that it will work is certain. The remedies will work. Do they work according to our schedule? Maybe not. Can we try to speed that up? Yes, but for every drug that exists, there's a homeopathic remedy that does the same thing. So we're going to remember sepia and ignition.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I love that closing statement because I'm sitting here listening and I'm just thinking about like a handful of people in my life that really could use homeopathy, not just for infertility, but for like rheumatoid arthritis, this new polymyalgia, Lyme's disease. Like I know so many people, like a handful of people that
depression, anxiety, it's so vast.
Yeah.
It's so vast. Well, I would just say, the depression and anxiety, the Banerjee protocol. So if you go to homeopathic remedies on Lyme and you say, I have Lyme disease, Lyme protocol, there's a protocol. Anxiety, there's a protocol. All the remedies and the dosing. I'm the consultant there. I put up the remedies and the dosing instructions. And for most of the protocols, 3 months are under $200. Lyme disease, depression, anxiety. There's the infertility one, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. And 80%, they are proven 80% of the time, they're 150-year-old protocols that come out of India. They're effective 80% of the time. And if not, then you go to the second and then you go to the third. But it's a great, cheap way to start something and not feel like, people will call me and say, oh, I've got these remedies, but I don't know what to do with them. I say, well, you have the right remedies, but you haven't done anything with them in 4 years. Okay, so these are the dosing instructions. So we are now in a time where the need is so great post-pandemic. The anxiety is worse. The infertility is worse. The depression is worse. The downstream toxic side effects of being reactivated from the pandemic toxins are worse. And the need is great. And the energy, I kind of call it the help me. Help me. I feel the help me. And sometimes you say, like, I can't help so many people. Well, we can. We can say, here's a protocol. Start with Ignatia, just to calm your sympathetic nervous system, calm down. Just doing that is going to save your minerals. Maybe do a little hair test. It doesn't have to be, this big deep dive through thousands of dollars of tests and functional medicine, which is just a fancy way of giving you 100 expensive supplements. You can keep it simple. What I like about homeopathy is it's so simple. It's hard to believe that making that one change is going to ripple through all of those changes. But when you think of the plane flying and you make that 1 degree shift to the left, 12 hours later, they're really in a new direction. That's the kind of thing that we can see unfold. And I remember very distinctly, a woman came to me with 2 children and had a history of genital herpes. It was very troublesome for her. And I immediately put her on sepia. And she wrote to me 3 days later. She said, I felt different on my first dose. Is that possible? I said, no, it's very possible. She goes, I can't believe the difference. I've only been on it 3 days. I said, yep. There you go. So some people have really fast responses and some it takes time. And, for people who want coaching, and there's, I have a lot of do-it-yourselfers. So in my practice, I do try to, I will try to help people within their budget. Like if they say, well, I can't do that, then do these things, right? There's a space for that, depending on, what your budget is and what your goals are.
And what I liked what you said earlier was just really taking ownership, because people are wanting to take ownership of their bodies, their minds, their souls. People are tired of being told to do this or to do that. Like when you step into self, you do know what is best for you, and it's finding those facilitators. It's finding the things that resonate with you. So I really respect the taking ownership and like wanting to take care of our health, because our health is important, and there is an important purpose in this life, and it's to to live in your truth and to live to your fullest potential. And that's by taking ownership.
I agree. And, we weren't just put in here to, just futz around.
Mm-hmm.
No, we all have a purpose, and we all have more than one purpose. That's the big surprise to me. It's like maybe 4 or more purposes, and those purposes take energy, and the Holy Spirit can give us that energy through prayer and through through meditation. We can kind of focus in on what is my path. What do I want to be doing? How is this going to evolve? For some people, it evolves into a business. What you're doing evolves into a business in a community that's attracting like-minded people. But that we have a purpose and that we have something we're supposed to do, well, that takes energy. And the beauty of homeopathy, I'm going to close with one more closing, is, chiropractors move your energy around. Fantastic. Acupuncture moves your energy around. I'm a big fan of acupuncture. Reiki moves. Homeopathy adds energy. That's the biggest distinction. So I will tell people, I'm giving you, so I want you to imagine yourself in a car. I'm giving you gas in your tank. You're going to decide how fast you drive, how bumpy the road is, who else is in the car, and where you're going. But I'm going to give you the energy that you couldn't get otherwise. And with that energy, wow, where you go, who you go with, how you go, this is an energy source. That's what's so fantastic about it. It provides energy. And when that energy matches, the energy that I'm giving matches your lack of energy, like curing like, boom, that car moves. And
all the places you'll go.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. I love it. Do we have anything else that we want to close with? Do we feel like we need to go in other directions?
I think all the places we'll go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully with the sunroof on.
Totally.
A cute sundress on with someone we love in the car and enough snacks.
Living in your frequency, living in your true frequency.
Yeah. And maybe you can edit this out if you want. I do AO scans. And I forgot to talk about that, but I do a frequency scanning of 120 frequencies that a person has based on their voice and technology that can measure their frequencies. And what amazes me is I can do my frequencies throughout the day because I have the software and I'm trained to see how many different things come up in the day. How my frequencies can be so radically different in a stressful period. And I can even look at my hormone panel in the morning and then at 3:00. And it's like, whoa, there were some big changes that are going on. And I can measure those and I do printouts. One of the most interesting things that I do is to do a voice recording of someone. And I used to have them say what makes me happy is, and now I have them say what makes me frustrated is. And they do a 10-second recording and I put it through the software and we pull out the one frequency that's the lowest and the 3 frequencies that are the highest. And then I make an audio recording of their voice frequency with the balancing notes. I mean, you said living in your frequency. So we all have a true hidden lower tone in our voice that speaks the truth to our unconscious. It tells us, I'm really sad, I'm really scared, but I'm compensating all the time by being cheerful, by doing this, by wearing bright colors and being a good girl and doing everything I'm supposed to do. But the inner voice doesn't lie. And when we change and lift with the compensating notes, all the notes have a compensating note. So if that lower note, if I feed the frequency 5 minutes twice a day with an audio tape, I change that frequency. I change everything associated with that frequency in the body. So just doing an inner voice recording can be profoundly helpful as a standalone therapy, and that's not that expensive. People, they update their voice. I had a colleague, I said, let me do an AO scan for you. This is so amazing. And she's like, oh, you're always doing the latest stuff. I said, this is really amazing. She said, okay. I said, well, what's your biggest problem? She goes, well, I'm 44. I haven't had periods since I was 42. I'm like, you're way too young. You're too stressed out. She's a homeopath. I do a voice frequency. She listens for 3 days. Her period comes back.
Wow.
And she's like, I'm sold. I'm like, how did that happen? I said, I'm not sure how it happened, but it did happen. And she's a homeopath, and we know our homeopathy. So this is this was more of a frequency, a spiritual, what the truth is, like that megapotency we talked about. There's a trauma. Well, we can clear that trauma, but we might have some self-talk that is very suppressive to our body that we're not so conscious of because we're always coming against it. But when we talk, and I make the recording, we identify all the emotions, the positive side of that tone and the negative of the lowest tone. And I'll be honest that I was shocked at what my lowest tone was, because I'm thinking I'm like so confident, everything's great. And that's not I'm compensating for some deep grief in everything that I do. And it made sense to me because I've lost a mother-in-law and both my parents in the last 5 years. And there's been a lot of grieving going on in our energetic field with COVID and trauma and things like that. But I was surprised how strong that was. So it helped me. I said, okay, I need more Ignatia at probably a higher potency, and I need to listen and allow it to counter that frequency so that everything below works better. Digestion, hormones, everything else. So that technology is an added tool that I would use. And I think for someone who is struggling with infertility, it wouldn't surprise me to see that lowest frequency be hidden grief that they don't let anyone know. But the voice tells us the truth. Mm-hmm. So I love AO Scan because I feel like I could replace any, hope no therapists are listening, but if you're you're a psychologist, talking about emotions doesn't change them. Mm-hmm. You re-stimulate them over and over again. So I'm like, do the AO Scan, save the $200 an hour once a week, talking about, let's shift it and then see what happens with the body. So that's another very interesting aspect of my practice that I'm excited about offering. And if someone just wants to do just the inner voice, it's $50, $49.95 to give me a voice recording, and then I do all the bells and whistles. If someone wants the full frequency report, it's a little more expensive than that. But I've done quite a few people. I've done children, autistic children, and that we've seen changes just having them listen with headphones to that frequency. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they are completely, the lowest note that shows up for those children on the spectrum is total, not conditional. They're not conditionally loved. Unconditional love is not there. They don't feel loved. Mm-hmm. They're so different. Their deepest wound is they don't feel love. Mm-hmm. And they don't feel accepted because they're so different and there's so many stresses in the family. So that's an interesting one. It's hard as a parent to see that, mm-hmm. but that's the truth in their voice. For them.
Wow.
Amazing.
Powerful.
So I, when you said our frequency, I was thinking about, and we're,
I like it.
We're sharing these right now. We're sharing frequencies. We're sharing our energies. Yeah. And we have to be careful about shielding and grounding ourselves because, you open I'm going to go open up that phone. And it's going to feel like a tsunami hit me. There's going to be this and this about the election. It's going to be this and then the environment. And there's going to be something on probably some kind of new pandemic down its way. And it's just constant bombardment of information and frequencies. And, getting empowered enough to sort of, to clear that away. That's where the Ignatia comes in. Mm-hmm. The chill pill, and it's not the Xanax and it's not the pot. It's way cheaper. By that sprouts. And it will do the job of freezing of that fight or flight response. I call it the below the neck. So up here, you're sad, you're grieving, you're stressed, but your body says, oh, business as usual, below the neck. Let's breathe. Let's create our hormones. Let's digest our food. Let's have our bowel movements. Let's not cramp our muscles. Let's do just below the chin. We're good. Mm-hmm. One of the keynotes of Ignatia is that lump in the throat, like you can't swallow. Right? The grieving and you can't swallow. So you take the Ignatia and then everything below the chin, business as usual. Mm-hmm. It's like you're saying, even though this is going on, this is okay. Mm-hmm. So I look at it as even though that'd be something you keep in your purse. Mm-hmm. Ignatia stays in your purse. You can buy all those at the homeopathic remedies online. $12 for 80 pills. last you 40 days, twice a day. There's nothing cheaper than homeopathy for do-it-yourselfers. So I would say Sipka and Ignatia.
Wonderful.
And I'm here if someone wants to take a journey with me. I'm here. If you want a complex journey, I'm here. If you want what's the cheapest I can get this done journey, and then maybe we could do another call about the fertility program itself at some point.
I'd love it. Yeah.
After you've been through it and you're pregnant.
I was gonna say, hopefully soon I'll be having an update.
Yes, you will be.
I think it was episode 5.
Yeah, it was.
5 that I did. Yeah. So if everybody wants to listen to what I've gone through personally, and if nobody knows, throughout this whole conversation, Kari is my homeopath that I've been personally doing this detox cycles with, and that's our connection, and that's why I'm so lucky to have her in my life, and so lucky to have her wisdom around me. And
Bethany's an A+. Got an A+.
I am now.
A+ right now, and and then once you get that, you get that report card, you get that A+. It's a dopamine rush. You're gonna do whatever it takes. You go down to. I tell people you go down to a B+. That's a wake up call.
Yeah.
Look at what happened the month before. Too much sugar. I stayed up too late. I got in a fight with my husband. This happened. My mother came, and it was a whirlwind, and we did so much. You look at what happened. If you're slipping, your period's late one day. Oh, can I give one more clinical tip?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
It's a great tip. Nothing's worse when you are sexually active and you're not on birth control. That your period doesn't come. And you're like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm not pregnant. And the pregnancy test says no. And I'm on day 5. And I just want my period to come. I just want my period to come. Well, you look at what happened the month before. You're going to have had so much stress that you're not going to have enough. You're going to lose, remember, you're going to lose your potassium and your zinc. Zinc is a precursor to progesterone. So we have someone take pulsatilla in a 30C or 200C. I have them take it twice a day in a 30C or once a day until the period comes. And the period will come sometimes the next day. So as a rule of thumb, if you can't get to that A, if you know you're not pregnant and your period is late and you don't feel good when it's late because it's this big buildup, you start with a pulsatilla 200C the next day, and you help the cycle to come by giving you the nutrients to produce the progesterone to produce the cycle. It's wonderful for women who are worried that, I don't think I'm pregnant, because then they go into, am I pregnant? Whether the test is wrong? I don't think I am. I wasn't planning on it. Maybe I shouldn't have quit the birth control. This is too stressful. I'm like, pulsatilla, and the period will come like clockwork. And then if you're late one day and you're usually on time, you had a stressful month. Take a pulsatilla, bring on the cycle, and then be mindful. But it's great to have the hacks, right? You have the little hack that, okay, I realize if it takes 3 days of pulsatilla for the cycle to come, then you really want to look at what you did the month before and kind of be more mindful of that. But that's a great tip. That's a great tip. That's the same remedy that flips a breech baby. Cool. Believe it or not.
Well, this is exciting. Jam-packed.
Okay, good.
We'll keep it like we said. I mean, we went a little over. We went like an hour and 45, but
okay, well, that's okay. I think I just want to roll. I always talk too much.
I mean, I think there's so much to say, and I think you have so much wisdom. So it's really hard. I think we could talk for probably 4 hours, and probably not.
I like the idea. One of my callings in life is to share wisdom that has been hard earned for me. Right. I don't like suffering in others. I'm an empath. So I think, if only one person sees this tape and gets off birth control and has a super baby, I'm good with that. Right. If it's just the energy between the three of us in an inspirational way that plays out with other family members and other friends, I'm great with that. We don't know how the Holy Spirit's going to use this information and who you're going to reach. I'm always surprised how people find me. One woman in California with a couple of websites. And I always say, how did you find me? And the stories are very interesting. Like, I've had people say, I was in prayer and meditation for 90 days and I found your website the next day. I'm like, okay. So there's a resonance. with information, and we're all here. Three of us are here, and it's my privilege to see what you're doing. I just applaud you. I never do webinars. I'm just working too much, but maybe that would be a fun thing to do when I'm actually retired, is just talk about sharing wisdom and stuff, because we don't have enough community, right? We don't have enough, we don't have the community style of the large family. I was from a large family, but then I moved and I was by myself, and I always had this longing, where's my community? And I've always struggled with community. When I became a homeopath, then I had a homeopathic community that was very helpful, of professionals and people like-minded. But it feels pretty lonely. Mm-hmm. You're struggling with infertility or any health issue, and just to have someone who says, I see that you're lonely. Mm-hmm. Your lowest note says you're lonely. I hear you. I see you. Mm-hmm. See what the problem is. Mm-hmm. I know it's recognized. And sadly, you don't get that in those 15-minute quick visits at the clinic, no. With your doctor. Mm-hmm. No one has the time. No. And everyone has the need, right? Yeah. And we can only help the people who come to us, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. right? Or who can be reached. So congratulations on trying to reach so many people.
So may this land in everybody's hearts, and may it reach as many hearts as it needs to. So that's our intention with this, for sure.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Maybe and love to do one in the future. So let's keep that on the back burner for the future. Would love it. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much, Kari, for being on this episode, for sharing so much wisdom with us. And we really appreciate it. And everybody, we will link all the information in the show notes. It's going to be a jam-packed show note with a lot of pearls of wisdom and links for you to go check out. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Kari.